I was asked to do this because I had some experience in marketing. I ran a few marketing organizations. I used to have some money. I had a lot of friends when I had money. I used to work for Hewlett-Packard, which is where I met Shadi about 15 years ago. I spent about $5 million a year. You've no idea how many friends I had. When I stopped doing it, you've no idea how many friends I lost. Because that was part of what people value. Let me just start out and say, okay, we're going to talk about marketing. How many people here want to be in sales? Okay, so let me give you the bad news. Your company is not going to succeed until you sell something. If you don't like the idea of selling, you're going to have to think seriously about who's going to sell whatever you do. I've been a sales guy. I know there's a lot of negative connotations around what a sales guy is, but for a lot of people, if you want to be successful, you need to learn how to sell. There's only certain things you want to sell that you believe in. Coming back to what Hussein's talked about, if you believe in yourself, you have to be able to get up and talk about it and sell it and believe in your product. So this is a consummate salesman. You can learn. So what you see in front of you today is someone who would not have been happy 25, 30 years ago standing up and doing a presentation for a group of people. And now I'm strange and I enjoy it. And I like big groups. And give me a few hundred people and I'll enjoy it. But I learned to do it. I'm probably saying you're the same. Most people are not naturally comfortable standing up here. So how many of you would feel comfortable standing up here now presenting? Some of you? Okay. Well, after this, we're going to get you to do your pitch, to practice, to come up here. And Shadi's talking like, he was saying 30 seconds rather, but I don't think 30 seconds is long enough to introduce yourself. So it's probably going to be 30, 60 seconds. We'll stand over here and do a quick pitch. So think about how you are going to introduce your group, your team, what your plan is. And we'll come back to that. But seriously, the personal attributes, being confident in front of groups, communicating like Hussein, and finding that sales is an acceptable role is something that you'll need, because without sales, you'll never get any results. So you do need somebody in the team. Coming back to your what skills do you need? If you're a bunch of techies or nerds or geeks or whatever words you want to use, you need somebody who's going to stand up and be the guy in front. So it's like the band, yeah? There's always going to be a singer, and there are people at the back playing drums and guitar. And the singer gets all the limelight. And they all end up hating the singer because all the girls want the singer. Yeah? So you need to figure out that mix. And you may not like the person who stands up front because they get all the attention. So let's look at marketing. Question, what do you think marketing is? When I say marketing, what do you think of?
Satisfying needs profitably.
Satisfying needs profitably, okay. You've studied marketing, you've got out of a book, it's a good one. Yeah.
Bringing awareness to our product.
Awareness, okay. So
I think it's delivering the message you want to say.
So delivering the message, okay. So awareness, delivering the message.
It's also psychology.
Psychiatry.
No, psychology.
Psychology. Okay.
You need to understand the people.
So understanding your customers, creating a brand and awareness that fits with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Knowing your opponent.
Knowing your opponent, yeah, it's a competition. All right.
Opening the communication channel between customers.
So communication between customers, okay. Anything else? Well, thank you, because nobody said advertising. Because when you say marketing, people typically say, oh, it's advertising. And for most people, that's probably the last thing you should do. So there was an author many, many years ago, and I've got the grey hair to show it. When I studied marketing, back in the 1980s, there was a guy called Philip Kotler. He wrote a book called The Principles of Marketing. It's about 2 inches thick. They still make it. They've updated it. And Kotler, I can save you reading a 2-inch book. He talked about 4 things. He called them the 4 Ps. So just to give you some structure, I've used Kotler's 4 Ps. So And hopefully the technology works. It's alright, it will go. I don't know why. So Kotler talked about the 4 Ps, the 4 Ps being the product, the place, or the marketplace where you're selling. He talked about price, and he talked about promotion. And when you take each one in isolation, put it together, you really get to your business plan, the things that you need to think of in terms of how does your business work. Okay, good exercise. It's I've got one plugged in, but for some reason, I'll tell you what. If not, we'll just plug it in again. In the meantime, so product. What I'd like to talk about is what is your product. And for me, a very simple thing. You're going to do a pitch today and tomorrow, but already start thinking about what is it you do. I like to pick on somebody who wouldn't have a clue what I do. And I used to say, okay, talk about my mother. I'd normally talk about my wife, but she might hear about it. But the issue is, can you explain to somebody who's not even in the business you're in or has the experience, what is it you do? If you can't keep it that simple and explain it, things like your investors are going to turn off immediately. They're not going to give you 10 minutes to show them a PowerPoint with all the details. They're going to look at you and say, what is it you do? And if you can't explain it simply, maximum 2 minutes, then a lot of people are just going to stop listening to you. They might stand there and go, yeah. You've already lost them. They've gone. If you can't explain it very simply, everything you've done has been wasted. So communication, being able to explain what you do. Looking at the variations. Can you look at different customers and change it slightly? So can you make cars and have something that's an executive brand and something that's sporty? So for example, Toyota made a very expensive brand and they discovered that nobody would buy it if it said Toyota on the front. So they call it Lexus. So how can you brand and create different impressions of what it is you're trying to sell? Are you going to do the research, the development, the manufacture of whatever you sell? Are you the right people? So I come back to your question about skill set. Do you want to do everything? Do you want to outsource some of it? And you can outsource pretty much all of it. So if you're not comfortable with sales, do you outsource that to people who are good at it and you focus on what you do? And I put it to you that you end up with 3 types of company. You either come up with a company that's product specific, so you really are the nerds, the geeks who focus on the product and that's what really gets you excited. Or you look at price and it frequently becomes low cost and you focus on making the cheapest possible product and thinking you'll sell enough, you'll sell volume and people will buy it and you'll make money that way. Or you're obsessive about customers. There's not too many of those about, right? There aren't too many companies that really come to you and say, are you happy? Do you really like what we bought? What we sold, rather. Probably the only thing around here is hotels, where you walk in the door and 20 people say to you, good morning, how are you? Come here, have this. This is nice. What did you think? Here's a survey. You don't tend to get that from a lot of businesses. So there's 3 types of organisation, and you've got to figure out which one are you most like. And again, look for the skills that fill in the gap, and either do it yourself or get someone else to do it if you don't like it, don't want to do it. So are you going to do all the R&D? What is your core competence? And what is your brand? So even if it's a service, what do you want your customers to think of you? So the lady at the back mentioned psychology. If you're Apple, you want to be cool, a bit different, and you don't care what people think. So Steve Jobs, in many ways, was very direct about the product and the design, but at the same time, he didn't care what a lot of people thought. So if you read about Jobs, he'd turn up, he'd wear his black turtlenecks, his jeans, he'd go and see somebody to get millions of dollars, and he wouldn't care what they thought of his jeans and his sneakers. In the early days, he didn't cut his hair. He didn't shower. His colleagues say he smelt. He was rude. He'd sit there in a meeting and tell you, you're doing a lousy job, and he'd be obscene. His language was terrible. Off you go. Not interested. So, what are you? What is your brand? And how do you reflect this? So we know that Mr. Armani over here has got a certain image, and I'm looking for the Mont Blanc. So you can't be Lebanese. You can't be Lebanese. You don't have a Mont Blanc. No. But your brand is all about how you're reflected. So what language do you use? What do you talk about? That's all got to be consistent. If you've got a team of people and you're all different, and one swears all the time and one's quiet, you're going to get a different image. What is it you want your brand to be? And you have to be consistent. So how do people see it, your brand? How do you define it? Are you cool? Are you boring? Volvo have made a living out of being boring. It's safe but boring. And that's why a lot of people buy it, okay? They get to 50 years old and they buy safe, boring cars. That's what a Volvo is, You buy a Volvo and your friends say, you got old, right? It's a boring, safe car, but if you have an accident on Sheikh Zayed, you're fine, unless you hit a Hummer. So what is your brand? And when you look at your product, it determines a lot of how much money do you need. If you're going to get R&D, development, manufacture, and outsource it, you don't need to build a factory. If you look at Intel today, Intel is spending, have they all gone? There's some Intel guys here. They're spending something like $13 billion on building new factories. So that immediately means that anybody who wants to compete with Intel has to have $13 billion. Not many of us do. Sadly, obviously. Not now, yeah. In the old days, we all had money, and Hussein and I had a few billion, yeah, right. So how do you do this? How do you get money? What do you need to finance? The product you choose and how you do this will determine a lot of what you have to do. Now, you've all talked about money and getting money from strangers. The first thing you do when you start a business is you go to family and friends. And frequently, they're actually called family, friends, and fools. Yeah, so you've seen this. People who like the idea. You don't give them equity in your business, but they like the idea of being involved. It's emotional. Hey, I'm a shareholder in a business. It's like I bought 10% of a racehorse and it might win, and I like the idea. In reality, I'm going to spend money on feeding it, the vet's bills, everything else, and it's never going to win, but I'm going to go and watch it race and feel excited that I own 10% of a racehorse. If I look at it financially, my wife would say, you're a fool. But in the beginning, that's what you're going to do.
That's just got through last week. My wife told me the same thing.
Your wife told you you're a fool?
Of the same exam.
Are we married to the same woman? So, at the beginning, you can get money from family and friends. And again, it's about you convincing and selling to them the idea. And being confident that they'll do that. And learning with the easiest people to practice with. If you've already tried the family and friends and people have got some money and they want a bit of fun, excitement, then why not? So try those people first before you get to the venture capitalists, which are going to come tonight, and Linda's going to tell you about some of the people tonight with money. But really you want to start on the family and friends before you start asking a professional you've never met to put money in. Yeah, and also you need some track history. You need some experience. And the guys that Linda's going to tell you about, the first thing they're going to say is, well, what have you been doing for the last 2 years? Have you got any money? Do you make a profit? They're not going to say, show me the product. They're more likely to say, talk about the money you've made, the costs and where it's going and how you're going to grow. So one of the things here is when you do get to the professionals, you may have seen The Dragon's Den on TV. Anybody? Okay, so I'll give you a comment at the end. The first thing the dragons do, the investors, is say, how much money have you put into this yourself? And if you stand there and you say, oh, nothing, thank you, bye. Because why should I invest in you if you don't invest yourself? If you don't take risk, nobody else is going to do it. Yeah, you have to show that you're putting at risk. So product is important. The product or the marketplace. What is the marketplace that you're targeting? Hussein said to me earlier when we were talking, we're niche. He's got several businesses. We're niche. We're very specialized. We don't try and do everything. So what is your marketplace? Where do you want to sell? How big is the market? If I'm an investor, I'm going to tell you, so where are you selling? How many units are you going to sell? What's your price? And what's your profit margin? Now today, if you look at globalization, I normally get into trouble with this. If you go to Cairo and you go and see the pyramids, and they take you to a museum, which is actually a shop, and you pick up the lovely old Egyptian gods, Osiris, Ra, beautiful, you turn them upside down, do you know what it says? Made in China. So, globalization means that it's good and bad, right? Because you can sell anywhere, but other people can sell in your backyard. So the Chinese have figured out how to sell a better quality, cheaper price product in Cairo and ship it 3,000 miles. So where are you going to sell? Who are you going to get to? How do you get to those customers? What is your target customer? What does your customer look like? What does your ideal customer look like? How can you classify them? And when you start to classify them, you can start to figure out what they're interested in and whether you should wear a Marni or a black turtleneck and look like Steve Jobs. And the language you use. And what else do they do? Where do they take their holidays? What cars do they drive? What do they value? So who is your customer? What are you looking at? So what's the profile of your customer? You can start to focus on a niche, and how you target them can be very specific. How do you reach the global market? Well, you could open offices all around the world like Intel, and come on, we've got some Intel guys left? They've all gone. So how many people... So how many people do you employ worldwide, Carlos?
100,000.
100,000 people. So you could be like Intel and open how many locations around the world? How many?
70 plus.
So 70 plus offices, countries.
250.
So you could open offices in 70 countries worldwide, employ 100,000 people, and you guys make a lot of money, right? Employees, yeah, you're paid really well, really well. So you can do the maths and you can figure out 100,000 people at Intel. Geez, that's a big salary bill, right? So you can either do it yourself, or again, you can look at it and outsource it and say, you know, Khalid, I tell you what, you go and sell some Intel product for me, and I'll give you a commission only when you sell. Thank you very much. That's one way of outsourcing what you do and not having the cost yourself. So what do? What is the marketplace? How do you get to a global market? Do you go through partners? Can you sell it online, whether it's a product or service? How do you get more reach without incurring the cost? Partners we can come back to. I know Linda talked about partners, but partners also cost money. And I'll come back to that in a minute. Any of you here thinking about partners? Thinking about it? Yeah. So partners is a good way of scaling, getting into new markets.
Keep that as an example that we don't sell there. Right? I mean,
No.
I cannot take a chip. It's also a chip, right? That's
Yeah.
the way they do that. Right?
Partners sell.
Well, they don't
So
speak.
one thing you might think about is, you know, you've got some ladies over here from Oman. If Oman is an interesting place for you to sell, maybe you should chat with them at lunch and say, what about selling my product or service for me in Oman? Maybe. So partners is a way of getting a lot of coverage and going global. Price. Well, it's very easy to cut the price, but it's very difficult to raise your price and go up. And basically, price funds everything. So people feel guilty about making profit. So I used to work for a company, Cisco, that makes a gross profit of 65%. A lot of my colleagues hated talking about it because they're very embarrassed that they make 65% gross margin. But the margin is going to fund your salaries, your research and development, any legal work, stock. You need to make a profit, guys. In fact, 5 to 10 times your cost is a great thing to aim for. It feels kind of obscene, right? It feels like you're making too much profit. But in terms of looking at what you buy a product or service at and what you can resell it for and the customer perception, that will allow you to fund a lot of your business to grow. So try looking at what is the factor between cost and what you're going to sell at. What is the price in the market? And there'll always be somebody cheaper. And let me tell you, the people who are going to be cheaper are likely to come from China, India. If you do something niche, you can compete. If you try and do something that everybody else can do, it's going to be tough. Price is going to be a big issue. So look at price. Is it easy to enter your market? So again, if I want to be competing with Intel, today I need about $13 billion to go and build some factories, and I need to employ 100,000 people, and okay, it's extreme. But we're talking billions of dollars. That is not a business that anybody can enter very easily. Some people are trying, their finances are small, but there's a barrier to entry. So is there something stopping me from coming into your business, seeing what you do and copying it and doing it cheaper? Is there a barrier? So is it easy to enter? Can I copy your products? If you want to protect your intellectual property, your ideas, and for example have a trademark in the UAE, you probably go to a lawyer after 2 years in business and spend $10,000 to protect your name for the UAE only. So part of it is a risk. At the same time, you can look at other products around the world and say, you know, I really like that a friend of mine was telling me he's having wardrobes built in his house. Back in Canada, he'd seen this great idea and it's not here. So, you know, in many cases, there's no such thing as a new idea, but you see things in other places and think, if I could do it here, this would work. So how do you create products? Can you protect your IP? Is there a barrier to entry? And more importantly, can you build a brand and charge a premium? So if you look at Apple today, this little baby is doing what? Over half the profit for Apple is coming out of the iPhone. Hugely profitable. Yeah. If you look at other companies, they're not doing so well. So profit and a brand is great. If you can build a brand and a following and customers, fantastic. So something like an Apple or a Coke, if you can build a brand. If you can persuade people it's sexy, it's cool, and they'll buy into it. But the challenge, of course, is that when you bought into this, you're looking for the new one. Yeah? So what's going to happen when we get the Apple iPhone 25? You know, and Hussein tells me, but Graham, I've got the Apple iPhone 25 and you've only got the 23. Is that going to motivate me to go running out and buy the iPhone 25? And it gets quicker, huh? New products are coming out all the time. And Apple used to be, how can I put it, financially a mess. Their products weren't great and they were going out of business before Steve Jobs came back. So it changes. Just because you've got one idea, you'll need another one soon, because the life cycle means that it starts up with low volume, it becomes mass market, the competitors come in, and then it starts to decline. So you then need another idea. So what are you going to do? So the variation on the product is useful. What comes next? So that's price. So let's look at promotion. Sorry, this became a messy slide. I put it on this format. It depends on the product. So in terms of what do you do, if you sell baked beans, it's all about advertising. So that people walk into the supermarket, they ask for baked beans, and Spinneys or Lulu's or whoever put it on the shelf and they sell it. And that's what they do. They spend all their money on advertising. If you come out with something very technical that's designed for a customer that takes you 6 months, 2 years to sell it, it's a sales job, especially when it's a few customers. So again, figure out which you are. If you wanted 20 customers by the end of the year and you could name them, I would suggest that you need a sales force. For me, it's sales and marketing, it's the same, right? So what do? If you want 20 customers by the end of the year, someone's got to knock on the door, ring them up, go and see them, ask Hussein, do you know this guy? Could you get me a meeting? Thank you very much. How can I help you? That's it. So what do? What is the style of your company? Online is cheap and measurable. It's a great way of getting results. So if you want to be global, you want to do business that way, it's a great way of doing it. Again, it's a skill set. It doesn't apply for everything. Public relations. So when I say public relations, what do you think? What do you think I mean? Media. Image, okay.
Network.
Reputation.
Press releases, okay.
Reputation.
Reputation, all right, okay. And you can get your story in the press for not a lot of money. You can get a public relations company, and you might spend 10, 15,000 dirhams a month and have a dedicated person who gets all your stories out to the press. And if you look at the column inches you get, it's a lot cheaper than paying for advertising. Or you can do it yourself. You can come up with your media list, you can target the media, you can create a brand, an image, and you have a spokesperson. And they become the brand. So you can do that very cheaply, and you can target certain media. So you can do that, but then you have to learn, as Hussein said, communication skills. What is your message? And if you do this, if you ever get to do an interview, go in there with 3 messages. Don't go in with 20 whatever, and don't let somebody guide you towards things that you're not interested in. 3 things that you want to communicate. End. So public relations can be very cheap. You can do it yourself. Advertising tends to be very expensive. If you get the Gulf News and you advertise on the back page, what do you think it costs? Guess. 60,000. Are we talking dirhams? Right. I think you probably find it's more like dollars. So if you want the back page of the Gulf News, it will cost you $60,000. It's very long term. It creates awareness, but it's not really going to have any short-term effect on your business. One of my first jobs at an IT company was cancelling billboards on the Sheikh Zayed Road. They cost about $70,000 a year 15 years ago. My first job was cancel them because they're a waste of money. I'd rather have people, contacts, relationship, sales leads. So advertising, yeah, nice, but not really. Networking, you've got to put your time into it, but it can be a very good way of getting business. So groups like BNI, they've got rules, there's money, you have to invest, but it can be a great way of learning and meeting people. You can do things like your own email newsletters. Email's great, social media. You can rent, you can get things like AME Info, websites that will do email rental for you. So if you sat there thinking, I don't know anybody, you can rent a dirham an email. You can get it sent out. You can target certain people. I want doctors in Saudi Arabia. Okay, there we go. You can target. Learn to communicate. Find journalists. Learn to be immodest. The biggest problem with most of us is we're shy, we're bashful. We've been taught that standing up and going, I'm great, I'm the best, this is really is not really acceptable. But when you were 5 years old, it was normal. So starting to be more outrageous and more immodest is going to help you. That's part of what you need to do. I would suggest social media and LinkedIn. I use both of those. LinkedIn's great. You can find a lot of people. You'll probably find both of us on LinkedIn. And some things I would look at. Make it measurable. So a lot of people with marketing complain that they spend money. It's like a bucket. They don't know where it goes. They don't know the result. I would say it's got to be measurable. What do I get back? A short sales cycle for your business helps. If you're waiting 2 years to close a deal, that's not a good business when you need cash because you need money for life. So if you can get a short business cycle, that's going to benefit you. How long does it take you from finding a customer to closing the deal? If you can do it within 1 to 2 months, fantastic. If you've got to hold 6 months stock and you've got to manufacture it, you need a lot of money. So if you can make it very short, even if you're not generating revenue out of new contacts, you can look at how many new contacts you generated. So I'll go home from here at the end of today. Part of what I'll do is look at my business cards and say, okay, who is interesting? And the first thing will be LinkedIn, find out about them and connect. And there are useful contacts you make. So you can do things like you can offer incentives. If you want to get contacts, you offer people something that they're interested in, like an iPad, and people register to your site, whatever you're offering. You can look at journalists And you need some reference customers. So one of the first things is when you talk to anybody, an investor, a journalist, tell me who's got your product, why did they buy it, what are they doing with it, and can I talk to them? So you really want 3 sentences from your customer saying why it's a fantastic product and why other people should buy it. And you ideally want references from them. You want them to say, who else do you think could benefit from using this? So again, it's selling, but it's asking for help from your customer. So you've heard the saying, say you saw something, same box. Yeah. So people using their contacts to grow the business. So you can be immodest, you can find things this way. Further reading, as everybody else has talked about it. Well, you can look at Philip Kotler, Principles of Marketing. It is 2 inches thick. If you want to be a marketing professional, great. You can also look at the Chartered Institute of Marketing. It's an online body, it's a UK based, and they do a variety of training on marketing. So you can do anything from negotiating skills to online. You can pick up courses. Look at the Dragon's Den. So the Dragon's Den was a UK TV programme with 4 wealthy individuals who got money to invest. And on every TV show, they got like 5-6 people came in and pitched their business. They asked them questions, and they'd either make them an offer for part of their business, or they'd all say no and leave. That's a very good tool for looking at the pitch and what an investor will look for. So are you investing in your own business? How many have you sold? What does it cost you to make it? What's your profit margin? Those are the kind of things that investors are going to look at. So look at the Dragon's Den. Great. The Intel guys have gone out. So look at Google. Sorry, they're competitors. It's kind of a subtle one. But if you look at Google, they do a lot of online business. They have things like AdWords. And look at their tips for how you sell online. And Google actually is quite helpful in terms of telling you what works and doesn't work. So look at Google if you're going to look up online and getting publicity. I like this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Anybody seen it? Read it? No one's read it. Ouch. Yeah, a few. So a very interesting book. It's mainly about finance and personal finance, but it also teaches you about how you spend your time and what you spend your money on. So he says, look, if you want to be rich, you have to have a different mindset. It's basically being an entrepreneur. So he's written lots of books, but the first one's probably the best. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You can find it in all the bookshops in the UAE. It's interesting. It's very easy to read. And my current favourite is this one at the bottom, The 4-Hour Work Week, because I like the idea of working 4 hours a week and being wealthy at the same time. So what this guy Tim Ferriss says is, look at how you can outsource a lot of your work. So he'd outsource his admin. He would get a call centre in India, for example, to do a lot of his basic work for him. And he'd focus on what he wants to do. And he now says that he only does email once a week for half an hour, which means he's free to do other things. So I found this very interesting. I'm still reading it. But different ideas of how you can spend your time, what you're good at, and what you want to outsource to other people. Because you don't want to do email every day for 5 hours. Trust me. I did it for the last 20 years. It's not a good idea. Very few people get fulfillment out of reading email for 5 hours a day. Rather like making phone calls, taking customer problems. You want to outsource some of that. So that's basically what this guy Tim Ferriss is saying. Figure out what you do. Figure out what business you want to run. Figure out how you minimize your cost and get other people to take the risk and get other people to sell it, fulfill it, and just collect the check. Then he can go and do stuff like scuba diving and salsa dancing and whatever it is with his life. So again, different ways of thinking about it. And with that, I think everybody's had enough of marketing, so you really need to be salespeople.